Good morning. Welcome to the February Technical Advisory Board meeting. This morning we're going to talk a lot about e-commerce. And so in the morning I've invited Satya Nadella here to tell us about Microsoft's product plans in this area. And then in the later part of the morning we'll talk about some of the research activities in this area as well. So pretty much most of this morning will be devoted to the topic of e-commerce. And with that, I turn it over to you, Satya.
Thanks, Jack. My name is Satya Nadella. I work over in the what's called the Commerce Platforms Group. I'm primarily responsible for a product called Site Server Commerce Edition. So what I was going to do today, I guess, is probably take you through the most non-technical of presentations that you'll be hearing, because I wanted to sort of stick to the overall Microsoft product strategy as far as what are we doing at the platforms level, at the application level, and as well as of our portal properties and what we're doing in MSN, and sort of paint a picture for you as to what's the scope of our product and services efforts. And then there are some specific areas that we are really working closely with MSR about as when it comes to intellectual property and rights management, which anyway there'll be a lot of drill down later, and you can sort of see the implications of how some of that show up in our product. So just as an agenda, we'll sort of do this strategy via roadmap, which is we'll talk about vision, we'll talk about what our real strategy is as far as product and service goals, and then the three specific initiatives into which you can take our efforts and sort of talk about them. An overall architecture and what's the sort of roadmap going forward is what we'll just go through. Bill likes to talk, or he's sort of written a book recently, I guess, where he has this concept of digital nervous system as a foundation for what businesses need to be doing. The basic concept is a lot of things are going digital, so if you want to really optimize how you use people, processes, and infrastructure, you need to really build out a nervous system that has all of these interconnections. And the focus of the nervous system is around three specific areas. One around knowledge management, the other around business operations, and the third being around commerce. And commerce being nothing other than saying all the systems that you've deployed, all the processes that you've deployed within the company, how do you really extend it out to customers and partners? And that's, by definition, how we view commerce, which is about really taking out if you take the business as the atomic unit, what exactly does it take to really extend the systems and the processes that they have in place out to customers and partners? And that's how we sort of look at what we want to do in commerce. So the other piece, as far as getting specific to what is driving our execution within the commerce side, is this vision of taking commerce for everyone. Now, when we say commerce for everyone, there's sort of three things. One is there's a lot of impediments still for consumers. There's finding the right thing, there's the privacy issues, there's the security and payment issues. So it's a question of what kind of client innovation or server innovation needs to be in place in order to really get to this more friction-free commerce for the consumers, and we'll talk a little bit about that. The other side is developer productivity, because fundamentally today, if you look at commerce deployments, it's largely, or to the most extent, it's a big company phenomena which takes a lot of dollars and a lot of investment. So developer productivity, what we do with our tool set, what we do with our object models, and how do we make it easy for people to build sites and build commerce applications is the other important piece. And then the last one is really this, we have to build systems and services which help all businesses. And I'll talk specifically about what are we doing in the small business space, which is a little bit, it's quite different than what we're doing for the large businesses, and sort of how do they come together. And in terms of what is specific or what is differentiator for Microsoft, there's two themes, I think. One is this concept of being able to really have a system that spans small businesses and large businesses. And the second thing is that we are sort of actively trying to move up the semantic chain, if you will, by defining a bunch of schemas which really make the process of getting these systems up and running much more quicker. So we believe that in order to really have commerce systems work, and in order for people to cooperate on the web, especially across trading partners and so on, we need to get to the next level of definition as to what is the semantics that we're dealing with. And I'll talk a lot more about what that really means and what is exactly our technical strategy there. So roughly, there are three fundamental Microsoft initiatives. The first one is around what we call the digital nervous system, commerce, products, and services. And they manifest themselves as features in the traditional Office line or back office line, and specifically the product called Site Server Commerce Edition that ships as part of back office. And I'll talk about that. And on top of that, we have a fundamental architecture called, I guess, distributed internet architecture. So we had to contrive that to get to that DNA three-letter acronym. But the fundamental thing there is a level of schema extensions that need to be built into that architecture beyond the three traditional things that we've talked about, which are presentation, logic, and storage. You need to even think about schema, and that's something that I'll say, I'll sort of explain as to exactly how we're going about doing that. And then on top of that, you have applications that are built by third parties across the internet, as well as some specific things we do in MSN. And the one specific thing that we'll be doing in MSN is building a consumer marketplace. And how does that relate to people using our products and services is something that I'll sort of go through. So overall, our identity is about building platforms, which essentially is Windows, Office, and back office. On top of that, there is a common architecture, which is DNA Commerce, which is around this notion of moving up the semantic chain and putting in some definitions of schemas and so on, and then really enabling third parties to build applications, websites, and what have you, as well as relating that to our MSN efforts, where we have a specific effort as far as building a consumer marketplace. It's interesting enough, most of our activity today has been business to consumer. If you look at the customers who are using the product, Dell and Eddie Bauer, Gap. So there's most of the activity is business to consumer, but most of the interest going forward is all business to business. And I think the market there is very hard. Oh yeah. So any sort of forecast as far as e-commerce market clearly says the B2B is the larger market. But the problem with business to business has been that it takes a lot more integration and change to existing processes to make anything happen there. Whereas business to consumer is, given the stories of Amazon and CD Now, it's about how do you sort of really get out there quickly and be a first mover. So there's a set of trade-offs that are a little different for business to consumer and business to business. So I'll just quickly go through really what are the products. So when we walk in and talk to any business customer about their, sure. You don't by any chance have a copy? The product itself? Oh, the slides are the hard copy. I can sort of email it, and then we can sort of make sure that the copies are made. So when we go to a customer and talk about what is it that Microsoft has today to offer as far as them being able to build applications or build fundamentally websites for commerce, this is the picture, which is at the very bottom, obviously, there's the application server. For us, that is the operating system, i.e. Windows NT Server. So that's where we have all of the sort of interfaces for storage, where the interfaces for doing transactions and doing the componentization and so on. That's the basic model. And on top of that, you also have SQL Server for being able to manage the storage, as well as what's one important area for us, especially in commerce, which is the OLAP and analysis capabilities. And then Site Server Commerce Edition, which is essentially a set of mid-tier objects, really bring all of these together for a particular application. And the best way to think about what exactly does Site Server Commerce have is in three forms. One is, the framework we use to describe the feature set is this engage, analyze, and transact. So it's about being able to engage customers and partners by doing rules-based personalization or doing some of the collaborative filtering work that folks in MSR have worked on and that we ship actually as part of our product. And so being able to use these rich notions of personalization and targeting, and then sort of tying that to being able to capture transactions. So how do you sort of really model a business process behind the website and then process the transaction, integrate with existing systems, and then lastly, how do you take all the data that's been collected and really do the log analysis? So it's not just the log analysis, it's about really creating a rich resource called the site data warehouse, which is sort of really aggregating all of the data of usage, user, content data, and then really putting in place the rich visualization tools through some of the work that we have done in SQL for people to be able to come at it from Excel or what have you, and really visualize the data as well as take action on that data. And closing the loop is sort of the most important thing. So if you really think about it, it's like a commerce runtime. It's about being able to sort of do user profiling and targeting. It's about being able to capture transactions. It's about being able to create this site data warehouse, and then really tying all those three things together at the object model level, at the runtime level, so that you can really close the loop. So any activity that's happening is actually leading to better analysis, which in turn leads to better targeting. And that's sort of the core. If at all we had to say, why does this product exist as separate from just saying, here is NT, here is a web server, go build it, that's sort of one of the fundamental pieces. There's two other things. One is we talked about developer productivity as being a critical thing for us and a key differentiator for us given what we have done with Visual Studio and so on. So we pay a lot of attention to putting the wizards in place, the templates in place, both in Front Page and in Visual Studio, so that people who are really writing to Site Server Commerce Edition have a great tool set to build applications. And then the other piece of this is integration with existing systems. By definition, as we said, commerce is about integrating your existing systems and then extending them out to your customers and partners. So you can't go in there and talk about commerce in isolation of what they have done or what investments they've already made. So we pay a lot of attention, again, to what does it mean to really be able to sort of take a transaction all the way to the CICS infrastructure that they may have, or to an Oracle database that they may have. And one of the areas that really is going to change a lot of this is this notion of at least loosely coupling systems using things like XML. So even if we do not have to do all of this in real time, what does it mean to do things like aggregate catalog information from marketing systems and transaction systems by making sure that there is some XML data that's flowing? And we fundamentally believe that an XML-based architecture for doing integration of data or interchange of data between the front-end systems and the back-end systems is probably one of the critical areas for us going forward. Go ahead.
Who are some customers today who are using this just as you?
In fact, I think in a couple of slides I have that. Why don't I just sort of talk about it, in fact, a bunch of customers. The other side to it is, so that was sort of the talk we would give to a Fortune 2000 type of company. So someone who is, what we consider a large organization or a fairly medium-sized organization that has an IT budget and an IT staff, we would go out and talk about basically a platform that they can use to build their application. Now, we bought a company called Link Exchange in November of '98, and Link Exchange is a very fascinating company because if you look at them, their entire strategy is about software as a service. They got at it by first building a barter ad network, but then they also got into, beyond just doing these building an ad network where people, mostly small businesses, exchange ads. They started saying, how about we deliver services to individual site owners without them having to write lots of code? And the way they would do that technically is basically run centralized services and have small snippets of HTML that can get stitched together on the site. So the services essentially range in two areas. One is promotional services. So any site that gets online, you may want to really get the keyword information of your site propagated to all search engines. So that's one small thing that you may want to do. The other things you may want to do is you may want to join their click trade program. So you want to be able to really have an affiliate program work on your behalf and drive transactions towards your site, and so on. So there's a sort of a set of small services. If you look at their sort of technology, it's nothing deep. But the point being is that this is the way small businesses are really sort of building a simple site using Front Page or some web-based wizard, and then adding richness by subscribing to services as opposed to buying products. That's the key insight here. It's not the deep technology that they have, but the deep insight is that if you really want to have small businesses really get to commerce, thinking of purely as a packaged product push, is not going to really make it. And if you look at the number of websites that use their technology today, there are 1.1 million websites that are part of the Link Exchange network. Out of that, 400,000 of them are small businesses. And you can just go down and down, and there are like 40,000 of them that are actually paying for their membership fees, because most of them are really ad-supported. But that sort of gives you a feel that there is potential for commerce activity to touch a lot of businesses if the software or the technology was provided in the appropriate way. So this is the slide which lists some of our customers. And so probably the most interesting case is Dell, because at least from the market awareness of what Dell is doing, they're doing around $10 million a day of revenue today. They're not actually our highest transactional throughput, just because their dollar per purchase is very high. They obviously have a lot more revenue flowing through their systems. Dell, is a great case because their business model was optimized for this channel. So they were in the mail order, telephone order business. They really had their inventory systems and so on optimized to deal with orders coming in online, so to speak. So they're a great case study for us. They tie back their Dell Online system to their Tandem-based transactional infrastructure. And their, Tandem in turn will tie back to their MRP systems for doing really the production pieces. The other thing that Dell's doing is not only just having this one website, but they have 500 premier pages. So this is sort of the power of all of the personalization infrastructure I talked about, which is how do you really take the data set that you have, but then really customize for each of your 500 corporate customers. So they have the ability. So if you as a corporate customer sign up for the Dell Premier pages, you will have a specific catalog with negotiated prices for your company that you can navigate through. Barnes & Noble is another customer of ours using a product today. They're an interesting one just because of the complexity. Well, in terms of sheer size of the SKUs, they have around 1.6 million books that you can navigate through. The other thing is last Christmas they saw a good hefty 10x increase. One of the things that happened last Christmas was most of our retailers saw a 10x increase in terms of their in terms of their volume, and that sort of speaks a lot to the kinds of things that we should be testing against and the scalability needs, because there is this entire peak load you just can't estimate beforehand. 800 Flowers is another great example. In fact, they do around 250,000 transactions through the year, so 250,000 purchases. The interesting thing is on Mother's Day itself, they'll do something like 15,000 to 10,000 transactions. So that's another phenomenon, which is it's very seasonal. On Mother's Day, in fact, they just completely redo their web farm. So in anticipation, they completely redeploy the number of servers that they need to be able to handle the kind of traffic. And so there's a whole, in fact, one of the phenomena that we are seeing is a lot of our solution provider channel and ISPs are hosting these. So it's not as if most of these businesses are just hosting this infrastructure in-house, but they're really going to people who are specialized in being able to deal with this web farm infrastructure, load balance effectively, depending on what the seasonality of their businesses are, increase bandwidth, within a couple of hours if it's necessary, and so on. So that's the kind of deployments we're seeing. We also have a lot of international exposure. In terms of business to business, I think we first of all think of what Dell is doing with Premier Pages as sort of business to business. After all, it's sort of personalized catalogs for businesses. Office Depot essentially does the same thing. They have a small business corporate purchasing site driven off of this Office Depot for content. Maricel is probably an interesting example from a business to business. What Maricel is doing is that they are dealing with their distributors. So Maricel is, their resellers. Maricel is a distributor. They have close to 250,000 resellers of product. So what they have done is they've built their website, which these resellers can tap into, and it's basically think of it as a directory service where they have 250,000 groups with each, with employees from each of the resellers within each of the group. it's not just that the resellers come in and type the order in, but they also have their own website, and in the back end, they do EDI-like transactions. So they submit an order, which is actually using a technology called this Commerce Interchange Pipeline, which is a feature of what we have for our site server product today, which allows you to sort of persist orders in XML and move orders around the web in XML.
Is XML going to supplant EDI as a way of...
One of the things, so fundamentally that's the inflection point, which is EDI had sort of, first of all, issues surrounding change management is roughly the thing. So the thing is, given that XML is both human readable and machine readable, there is a set of tools that you can put in place to really make the dream of EDI happen a lot quicker. So in fact, the first place where we're seeing a lot of activity is all the folks who have done these EDI transaction definitions, moving all of that to XML. So the first place to start is, you already put in a lot of work in defining these XML transaction sets, so move them to, or EDI transaction sets, move them to XML and then start from there. So we sort of see that as a real huge opportunity. I think those are sort of some of the examples. So the other sort of scenario is corporate purchasing within Microsoft. Sure, go ahead.
So I'm not really in this space at all. I look at XML from a very different point of view. It's hypertext capabilities. Do you see a real movement in the industry towards XML for e-commerce and away from EDI?
Yes.
Is that a growing trend?
Yeah, it's a growing trend. So there are a couple of levels. One is with the work that's being done at the XML schema level, i.e. XML data definitions that are being pushed through W3C right now, that really will form, I think, the basis. But if you look at the industry initiatives like RosettaNet, which is an example of how people in the high-tech industry are coming in and defining a set of XML schemas for how product information, forecast information, inventory information moves up and down the value chain, is just an example of really EDI transaction sets rethought. There is also a specific effort called EDI XML, where they're taking all the ANSI X12 work as well as Edifect work, which was done in the EDI world, and mapping it to XML. But one of the fundamental things is there's a lot of, obviously, also hype around XML, and at some point, there are people who say XML could be XDR and no different. So what is the real deal here? Why will this really work? So the notion of being able to do this semantic interop and the ability to really have the robust tools for mapping that people can use is going to be sort of the make or break for XML. And so that's going to be one of the efforts I'll talk about that we are especially investing in.
When you look at these various sites that are using e-commerce servers, relatively speaking, I mean, how much of it is the base system that they're using that we ship versus how much are very specialized solutions that are done by solution providers?
Sure. There's a lot of custom code today. So if you look at it, even the commerce server category, and time when you were involved with that, it's sort of grown in 3 releases. First release was nothing other than saying, here's a little bit of point-of-sale functionality. Second release, we added the notions of a little bit of personalization. Third release, we added more rich analysis capabilities tied together with a little bit of personalization and transaction, but still the runtime I described and the tight integration that I described was not there, so it required a lot of integration. So fundamentally, out of this experience of having watched a lot of system integrators and a lot of solution providers build these custom solutions, we have now sort of the thickness to really make it easy for somebody. And I'll give you a good example. Chapters is, I guess, a Canadian Barnes & Noble, effectively. They, last year, decided that they, were not going to just roll over because Amazon exists, but, make a go at their online business. So in February of '98, they decided that they wanted an online business. They, in fact, hired an ex-Microsoft guy, Rick Siegel, as their president, and they decided to say, okay, let's go and build this using Microsoft technology. They brought in an SP in February, and they were done by sort of late summer, and they went live in September. So sort of, if you look at the sort of, and if you look at the site today and you sort of go back to Amazon, it's pretty comparable. It's not as if they have at a feature level, other than the momentum that Amazon has, at a feature level, Chapters is not a bad site at all. and is very comparable to what Barnes & Noble has done on Amazon. So, and if you talk to him and what the jumpstart site server gave him or the recipe, it is clearly a lot more. In fact, he'll tell the story of how he had looked at Site Server 2.0 and said, there's no way this is going to help me at all. It's better for me to just build it on my own. And then he had an SP look at 3.0 and said, wow, this is much better for me to start from this as opposed to start from. But if I had to sort of really say, look at the entire e-commerce unit volume today, the number of people buying commerce server products, I think, is about reaching the level of homegrown solutions now. So that's where we are. Now the only question is, can we prove that over time, even those folks who have built their their own systems will want to upgrade to something like this and build on top of it.
Is the major competition in the space today just people that roll their own?
In reality, that's the case.
Like IBM
I would have said that from a unit volume perspective, for the top 150, 200 sites, definitely roll your own is still the competition. So, when Peter Newport left and he started drugstore.com, so he faces, he's going to really build a very custom solution, and it's going to be one of those, drugstore portal. He faces the decision whether he should just roll on his own or buy one of these products. But from a real product competition, it's IBM. IBM is the closest competitor. Netscape is interesting. For all the Netscape news and hype, they have around 150 customers, and we have approximately 2,500 customers, which is the unit volume leader in the commerce server category today. IBM is close to around 2,000.
Do we think that AOL is going to try and get into this space now with its alliance with Sun and Netscape?
Yeah, the speculation is Netscape has probably the most extensive product line, which they call the Commerce Expert line. They have very specific. In fact, they went. If you look at the history of Netscape, they did, first of all, a joint venture with GEIS called Actra, which they bought back. So as part of that effort, they got into this packaged products for specific corporate purchasing, sell side of the business-to-business equation, and also an EDI gateway. So they're taking all that forward, as well as the traditional merchant server effort. So they have a pretty broad line of packaged products. They even have, I think, close to around 250 to 300 people working on that product line. The only question now is, I just came back actually from an analyst tour last week. Netscape, there's this feeling that AOL is a consumer-driven company. That's what they're really focused on. So it's a kind of wild card as to how does Netscape's enterprise product line really play out, in the future, especially given that Sun and Netscape actually have differing application servers today. How does all of that come together so that actually the Sun sales force can sell something that is Netscape's server product? And that's not come together. But we do, from a competitive standpoint, we do pay a lot of attention to, because the day Sun sales force is very comfortable selling, say, the Netscape product line, they will be a formidable competitor. I think I've sort of gone through some of these proof points, but one piece probably is this extensibility model, because what is the commerce layer? Fundamentally, it's built on top of the application server. So there is this notion of web application servers, which are, in our case, fundamentally part of the operating system. So for us, it's COM Plus, and MTS, and all the work that we're doing there. But there are others like NetDynamics or Kiva, which are sort of separate application servers on top of which you build these apps. And the key thing for us has been that we've really gone in there and designed, obviously, the infrastructure which is optimized for our app server. So we always sort of integrated, assuming that we're building on top of MT. And that gives us, first of all, an object model, an extensibility model, which really a lot of our partners have been able to sort of take advantage of. If you look at the sheer number of third-party applications that build on top of Site Server Commerce Edition, we're sort of way ahead of where the competition is. And that's fundamentally because of the ability to really write COM objects or applications on top of it.
I noticed you haven't talked very much about payments at all. And so, there's sort of two parts to this. There's sort of very standard payment techniques. And the other you can think of as not so much payments, but sort of interesting market-making techniques like auctions or various funny ways that you could improve or
sure.
Have special deal with perishable merchandise very effectively by rebalancing prices constantly and so on and so forth?
That's interesting. So there's sort of two questions. One is payments. We have had efforts. First of all, there are people obviously doing credit card type of payment infrastructure around this. So what we have is we have a client, which is the Microsoft Wallet that ships as part of Internet Explorer, which has the ability to plug in payment protocols, and we are ourselves implementing SET. But there is an issue there because SET is not really taken off, especially in the U.S., given the existence of SSL and the encryption on that being good enough, it looks like, for most consumers. So SET doesn't have momentum yet. There is some momentum globally, especially in countries like Japan and in Europe, where they want that to happen. So we have some investments in that space, which is how do you really make payment happen for the consumer. We also have people like Verifone, CyberCash, IC Verify, and CyberSource, and a whole host of others who are essentially clearinghouses plugging in payment modules into our server infrastructure. There are also people who are plugged in, like CyberCash, their micropayment infrastructure. So there is a certain class of sites that really use that anonymous payment on sites which we don't like to talk about much. And then there is payment types itself. So there's innovation. People speculate about whether there's a debit card which has a different kind of an interchange rate, and there is some experimentation going on. There's the concept of e-checks. So there's a whole lot of things that probably Yaak or someone can actually sort of talk more intelligently about. But the point is, way at least we are looking at it is we just want to track what's there as far as the universal payment momentum today is credit cards. So we're sticking to saying, okay, let's just make credit cards happen, and as and when there's a new payment system that has some kind of traction as far as broad adoptance from the consumer space, we'll take that. But the next question you asked, which is what about auctions and what about really having more efficient forms of exchange? That's a very interesting one. We in fact have an auction engine. I didn't talk about the size of it. Today we ship a very sort of simplistic auction engine which has the basic notions of bids and asks and execution and settlement, and which is being used. In fact, Universal Studios is one of our customers that uses the concept of auctions to essentially auction off all Hollywood memorabilia. So you could think about it, one of the things that's happening on the web is, for products such as excess inventory or closeout sales or stuff that they would have traditionally not found a market for, they look at this and say, oh, well, why don't we just really make it easy for people to come to our website and buy some of these products? So there's a lot of interesting things. And going forward, we think auctions are probably going to be more interesting in a lot of these business-to-business type of things. So which is the entire process of being able to do RFQs and RFPs and getting bids back and then doing settlement is something that we're looking at. So we're modeling this concept of a marketplace where multiple buyers and sellers come together. And in fact, the next piece of technology I'll talk about will have some notions. So going forward, what are we doing? We're taking site server commerce technology as well as the link exchange technology and focusing it on three things. One is sort of really focus on building an enterprise server. So this is for the large companies and the medium-sized companies that want to build their own commerce application. We also have a separate effort called the Commerce Interchange Server. This is fundamentally saying, how do you do EDI using some of the new technologies like XML? Today we have, as I said, a rudimentary feature which is bundled as part of Site Server, but the customer feedback has been that this is a fundamental thing for us going forward, doing business-to-business data interchange, and we want that to be logically separate from the website. And then the last one is a very focused effort as far as small businesses go, but it's mostly from a services perspective. Instead of sort of really saying, here is a set of bits, go figure, how do you really make this very straightforward as far as running the services that small businesses can use to build, promote, and manage their commerce site. I'll just sort of drill down on each of these. This is probably a little more detailed description for those who are familiar with what the product we have is. But one area which is very close to what we are trying to do with MSR specifically is around the data mining space. So for example, as we said, the real trick is to be able to really do good personalization based on some rich profiles capture a lot of the transaction flows, and then analyze the data. But then how do you close the loop? And some of the work we're doing with Usama and so on is just to say, okay, what is the clustering algorithms that we could use in that context, as well as the collaborative filtering pieces on the front end to be able to do the fuzzy logic pieces. So that's sort of the core pieces, I think, where we really can, given the work that's happening in MSR, really take that to market in this product. So the basic this is sort of a very basic picture which shows what does really a commerce server look like. I think the best way to envision this is that there is a set of aggregated schemas. There's a set of schemas into which you aggregate data for user profiles, the ads and content of the site, even the promos, the catalog itself, which is a very structured way to sort of really think about products, product families, groups, and so on, and the transactions. So the thing that we have learned is there has to be a rich notion of how do you really aggregate this catalog. Nobody has a product catalog. Everybody has price information in their line of business system, product information in Quark, right? So there is a whole bunch of product information that's really spread out across a variety of systems. So the question of creating an online catalog is actually one of the most expensive pieces for anybody who's going to go online. So how do you really aggregate all of this data? And then on top of that, fundamentally, we have a set of services or objects which operate on that schema, on that data, helping you build sites. So for targeting, how do you really do things like promos and direct mail and ad targeting? And also there's real-time recommendations or rules-based targeting using expression. So that's one sort of runtime engine. The other engine is about just being able to capture transactions. So how do you really, first of all, capture the transaction, take it through a process flow during which there are a bunch of calculations happening, or there are call-outs to existing logic in existing line of business systems. And then lastly, it's about being able to build a data warehouse and doing the import analysis.
So is it relatively easy to build a system that looks at users and how good a customer they've been and tailor the pages they see based on things like that? It's relatively easy to do.
Well, I would say today it's not relatively easy. It requires coding. Fundamentally, what's happened is we've had various attempts. So we had this concept of a rule builder where people could go in and sort of type in rules for targeting. It turns out that the user interface and what we have done there is it's not good enough for the marketing manager because it's not intuitive, nor is it good enough for the developer because they would rather just write script. So we're getting better, and we're that's why we're going to something which is more of a Boolean expression type of an evaluator as opposed to this complex rules, because, so we want to really take the power of targeting, the concept of being able to visualize something and then use that insight to be able to take some action and put it at the marketing manager's desktop.
Part of the difficulty here, Dan, is this product doesn't have a notion of what the UI looks like. So the UI is totally in the control of the user. One missing piece, perhaps, I don't know if it's important to the product, is sort of a model. If you gave the user a framework, here's what a screen looks like, and now we get to put it in for you or something like that. That doesn't exist.
Now that's the interesting thing. That's what this business and partner is. Up to now, as Usama pointed out, what we have said is we're an SDK, we're a toolkit. Here is a great rich set of objects. Go build your application. So now we're stepping up, if you will, to really put these applications in place, which will still have an extensibility model and so on. But at least we are saying for the user manager, the catalog manager, the campaign manager, and all of these functions that a marketing person may want to do using the schemas we have. So the notion is just fill data, and then you have an out-of-the-box application, and you have some sites that work. And of course, you can further customize it. And that's the process we're going through right now.
So if you had to choose between very big companies and very small companies, when you say small business, what does that mean?
Small business would be, for example, just to give you a typical example of a link exchange customer, it could be a company which is, let me say, out of the 400,000 small businesses that we classify as part of link exchange, 40,000 of them make actually more than $1 million of revenue in a year.
Only 40,000.
40,000.
Okay.
So that means there is a whole host of 360,000 of them are these one PC shops with people who probably are actually putting products in eBay,
Right. So when I look at this diagram, for one of those under $1 million a year customers,
this is
very complicated.
This is gibberish. Yeah, this is they're not going to look at this at all. That's why I said this is really an enterprise-focused product.
So what I'm trying to understand is we saw the taxonomy of where you've got every base covered.
Yeah.
If Microsoft wanted to really win big, is it all of the above? Is it, gee, if we could get the big guys and the little guys came along, that'd be okay? Or is it, we really want the little guys?
So you're saying is there a very focused strategy?
The emphasis,
the emphasis is actually, the unfortunate answer is all of the above, right? So what we're doing is we are taking our, we specifically are targeting the enterprise customer with a packaged product.
Okay.
We're targeting the small business with services as part of MSN.
Okay, so there's a service component there.
Exactly. Which I was going to...
Oh, you're going to get to that.
Okay. Yeah, which is...
Right, and so the question I have there, maybe you can address when it comes up, is IBM's going after those guys, right? And
the big guys or the small guys?
The little guys now,
okay.
seems like. And part of their strategy is the hardware aspect as well. In other words, that they look at these little $100 million a year guys and they say they can't even work out what computer to buy to put the software on. So what we really need to be thinking about is sort of reference selling a complete solution. So
that's a good point.
So are you going to talk about how Microsoft might address that?
So let me sort of specifically address this IBM issue, which is IBM's model is very straightforward, right? Which is this is the one-stop shop. For example, the way IBM deals with EDI interoperability is very straightforward. They basically say, here is net.commerce, their equivalent of commerce server, and here is global services to do your EDI. So that's a very different approach than what we're doing. So we have to take the complexity out, even for the medium guys and the big guys, and package it up so that our solution providers can be more effective. And that's the fundamental sort of game that we have to sort of get better at doing. Because at some point, the IBM thing won't scale in terms of being able to reach out. Even their global services cannot employ everybody in the world, so to speak, sort of to be able to reach that out. So that's our fundamental strategy there. But for small businesses, I may not be aware of some of the information you have as far as what IBM is trying to do there, but fundamentally they tried a couple of web mall-like things where...
this may be outdated too. My point is that there is this sort of issue with small business of wanting the complete solution, and that typically does involve some sort of...
The AS400 solution. You sell them a box that has the software on it, boom, and that's...
No, that's very attractive actually to me. See, when I say small business, I'm really looking at the guy who is going out and building a site in one of the portals, and suddenly decides that they want to add a couple of product pages and wants to be able to do that. So that one we sort of go at using something like MSN and the 1.1 million sites that I said.
It seems like ultimately what I consider small businesses, they don't want to have hardware at all.
Yeah. They may not. I mean, my point is that whatever it is...
That's the way.
Why would they want to have hardware?
My point is that they want a complete solution. They don't want...
Here's
a CD-ROM and you handle it from there.
But I think the solution that they want is I have my personal PC and there's a service that I use, and through my PC, going to the web in a normal way, I can create the site that I want, and somebody else, and all I do is pay for it, and somebody else keeps those machines running and figures out how they work.
That's exactly. So in fact, the crisp answer to your question is really we're going at it as software as a service, if you will, delivered over the web to small businesses as one strategy to take that complexity out for the small business, i.e. there's no hardware, we're running it on your behalf.
Do small systems have back-end database systems in-house or not?
The very small folks really don't even have. Then they will, just so that you know the state of the web in a lot of the small business, they will accept a transaction which was somehow, which was encrypted at best and stored in a file system, which they nightly download and punch into their point of sale to do settlement. So that's the sort of state. So you can think about how you would automate it a little better. So you could really think about running the entire point of sale in the sky on behalf of the small business. In fact, that's happening independent. So the people who are point of sale vendors or service providers there are now going to businesses, small businesses, and saying, why do you want to buy a point of sale? We'll just run the service on the web and you just swipe the thing. So that's the basic answer, which is we'll come at it by trying to take the complexity out and putting it into packaged products and working with our channel for the big and the small, and the medium guys, and for the small guys through a service. And I'll sort of probably get into that small, you'll get a better feel for what does that really mean, offering a service.
One thing you haven't really talked about, but there's sort of fundamentally a content problem here too, right? Which is how do I get information about products into the system, right? So that again, if I'm a small, medium-sized business, I don't really want to have to recreate all of the knowledge and information about the product. In some sense, I'd like the manufacturers to be doing that.
Actually, yeah.
And then somebody to coalesce it, and for me to be able to just say, pick and choose what's there. So if I want to sell, if I'm a camera dealer,
that's a great example.
I like Canon,
yeah.
To just give me the more modules.
So let me
that I can just put into the system.
Let me just talk about that specifically as it relates to MSN and what we want to do there, because we are trying to build such a consumer marketplace in MSN. But in order to build that, you need this product information from retailers and manufacturers, and I'll talk about that and and also what we're doing at the product level for that. Quickly on the interchange server, the vision here obviously again is how do you really do business process integration within and between companies. And in order to really do this, you have to have two fundamental things. One is a sequencing engine, which allows you to model a process, and a data transformation and a mapping engine that allows you to do the semantic level mapping. Those are sort of the fundamental pieces. There's also the notion of being able to do trading partner management, because you need to manage the security context that spans enterprises. Is another critical piece, because you need to be able to sort of digitally sign documents so that they can move between systems and cross enterprises. This is sort of a rather overly complex picture, but the point being that there is the ability for two applications to really communicate using an infrastructure in the middle which handles the interchange process as well as the data transformation process. And just an architectural underpinning of the work here is all around XML. So we have this notion of moving data from SAP iDocs to some canonical XML schema, and using technologies like XSL, in fact, to do the transformations. Of course, there's some procedural extensibility that's necessary, and over time we'll get better at really combining some of the work that we've done in SQL, table-driven data transformations, and the XSL pieces. So that's a big, huge area. If you look at why does Microsoft's identity come in as the business-to-business layer, it's about doing EDI right. It's about being able to do this business-to-business data interchange. So this is sort of a core project for us.
Well, and to some extent, one of our advantages here is that we've really been one of the leaders in this sort of XML, XSL area.
That's right. So in fact,
so we're pushing the envelope there more so than almost anybody else.
Yeah. So that really, the work that Adam Bosworth and a bunch of those folks have done really gives us a jump start over a lot. Because if you look at it, like Netscape is a classic point. They did the joint venture with GEIS and essentially built an EDI system. So now they need to completely revamp that. So there is a whole, huge slew of advantages we get there. Let me just talk to that small business product. So what we're going to do is, probably the best thing is to sort of show the picture, and this might be more intuitive. Think about it as a set of promotional services. So today, Link Exchange has the ability, as I said, to be able to take keywords from your site and propagate it to some 60-odd search engines. They have this banner exchange so that you can start doing some promotional across the network itself, so exchanging of ads. They have this concept of click trade, which is essentially how do you do referrals. So if how do you really do pass-through transactions and make additional revenue? So those are a set of services where there's no code required. So fundamentally, you add a little bit of snippets of HTML to your site, and you become a member, so to speak. And so what we'll do there is we'll build front-page bots. So anybody who is building a front page of your site just will have a small bot which will allow you to subscribe to these services. So that's a set of promotional services. Even at the back office level, what we'll do is we'll have a concept of a universal shopping cart. So instead of you, who is the owner of the website, having a notion of a shopping cart that's resident at your site, you can have a shopping cart in the sky, so to speak, and then you give in their product information there, so they will manage the checkout process for you. So we're going to have the shopping cart, the integration with the existing payment systems, and also the notion of being able to manage stores and so on. There's one part of the answer to what Rick you asked about is we will have the notions of being able to extract product information from something like QuickBooks and so on, and then propagate it up. So make it a little easy for small businesses that have some existing product information in their sort of low-end accounting packages, and really use that data both for propagating data up there and getting orders back and propagating them back in there. So those are sort of promotional back office services. And the other piece is actually the creation of the site itself. Up to now, traditionally, we have said, if you look at most of the customers that we have in the small business space, they've bought front page. You build a site using front page. They go to an ISP who is hosting front page server extensions and is willing to host the site for them. Going forward, we believe that there is even a lower end of customer than that, which is they don't even want a client authoring environment. All they want is just a browser-based wizard that they walk through, and at the end of that sort of process, there's a site that's been created. So it's a template-driven wizard that we will create, which will essentially generate the catalog for them. And then we will also provide ISPs the ability to sort of really provision such a wizard. So the strategy from a Microsoft standpoint is that there will be a set of services that we will host and run centrally. We will have the ability to take those central services and stitch them to any existing small business site. We will also make it easy for ISPs who work with us to really create these sites and have the notion of tying into our services. So that's the sort of approach we're going to, which is to take a lot of the richness of site server or anything like that and start offering them more as services over the network.
Are there issues with front page and compatibility with websites like people using Netscape?
Yeah.
Have problems with what front page generated pages and
Right.
so forth?
Right. So that's why. So the reason why I put the front page thing is that we're not tied to front page. You've reached because this is a classic example. Yahoo Stores, which is the example of what Yahoo is doing. So you can go ahead and create a site which is all just through a browser. What's happening in the small business space is people who have sort of reached the threshold of complexity, even like 15 products, 20 products, and 10, 15 pages. The paradox is that small businesses get online using a low bandwidth link. So just a completely server-driven thing doesn't work that well for them because the rendering is difficult. It's just slow. So what they would rather do is have the notion of building the site locally and then propagate it once and for all, as opposed to going online for making every change. So in order to allow for that flexibility, we will say, you create the site, but if you reach a level where you want control of the site, suck it into front page and manage it locally and post it back. But it's not necessary. So your point about front page and its compatibilities with a whole host of other stuff. So if it's like an Apache server running on Unix that you put some HTML snippets to tie into promotional services, it's not probably the way to go.
So you don't think the other model, getting back to this hardware question, that seems to be out there, is this model that you develop your site locally, but that essentially it gets cached to some high bandwidth node through some internal server or something like that.
Right.
There's a couple of companies
Sure.
doing reasonably well in that space.
Yeah.
You don't think that's going to scale?
No, that might be an interesting model. For us, we say those are the kinds of customers who are probably building using Interdev or front page today. And if they're buying such hardware, that's great. But the thing is, the customer for this doesn't have any notion of a web server local.
Right.
Right.
We're still good.
Yeah. Okay. Just quickly about MSN. Just a first marketing slide. I'll just skip this. Probably the one statement I should make as far as MSN, its momentum goes. We're definitely not number one. It's known fact where we are at the MSN. But the interesting thing is, we really invested early on a lot of vertical properties. So in travel, in autos, in sort of real estate, and so on. So we really have, which is a little bit of a differentiator compared to what Yahoo or anyone, Excite or anyone else has done, which is really build these deep vertical properties. So if you look at commerce, there's a whole sort of lot of rich experience that people at MSN have as far as being able to really build these marketplaces, bring buyers and sellers together, do data interchange, aggregate product information, and so on. Reach is fundamentally a notion of what is the user. So basically, the way how you calculate the total page views based on the total sort of aggregate page views that are being served up by all websites. Percentage of customers. It's like a television number. How many people, how many viewers do you have? So it just talks to the number of the total web population that's being reached by MSN properties.
So it's like touched once a month, or they've got
right.
a magical interval of time.
Okay. So I think that's the basic point. So what I wanted to talk about is what are we doing to make it convenient for shoppers? or convenient for doing e-commerce. One of the first things is this concept of membership services, which is how do you really have a single log-on capability instead of you having to remember different passwords. The first thing we're doing here is do this for across our own MSN properties, because today we have a password for Expedia, a password for CarPoint, and a password for Hotmail. How do we really bring all of that together so that one single log-on can really get you access? And then we will also help federate this with partners, so which is how do others participate in that scheme of being able to share the base profile and the password information. This gets into a whole host of privacy issues. So what exactly is the information that's captured? How is it escrowed? What exactly is the information the partner sees and we see? And that's a topic unto itself. I say that because that's the foundation. And then the next concept really is, if you look at Sidewalk today, which is sort of our effort to create these local entertainment guides and buying guides, that's sort of the place where we're going to start and really create a consumer marketplace. And this is not just what a shopping bot does, so things that MySimon or Django or anyone else, or where they just go crawl a variety of sites and create some comparison infrastructure is not really the goal here. The goal really here is to really create a governed marketplace, a more structured marketplace where you have various merchants or various manufacturers submitting information in specific formats that then make it easy for the buyer guides and so on to operate on. So the concept is probably best explained by this picture, which is, think about retailers and manufacturers propagating data using a variety of methods, using just simple web forms that fill in product information, or they give us permission to crawl their product databases or their sites, or using the interchange infrastructure I talked about, and really propagating the information up to what I would say is sort of three fundamental databases that we'll build out. One is a database of business information, so it's the business directory, it's like the yellow pages. The second one is the products, the product information, the service information. And then the last one is the promotional or the offer information. Those are the three fundamental things. We have, in fact, today, this infrastructure beneath what we're doing with yellow pages and buyer guides. But it's mostly bought. It's sort of the process of being able to get that thing, and it doesn't have any notion of really multiple participants pushing data to us. It's something which is done a lot more handcrafted way. So we want to really open this up. So we will publish a set of schemas. We will have a whole host of sort of evangelism / standards efforts to really help us get to the data that retailers and manufacturers have. So it's sort of, this is the place where manufacturers, it's not something that this is specific to Microsoft. Once the schema, the data is in the schema, it's possible for manufacturers to sort of take that data and propagate it to their own retailers and not really participate in the Microsoft marketplace if they don't want to. But the point being is that we have to, if we really want to create a marketplace where there is real product information which is up to date, which is correct, we can't have what's going on the web today. Because if you look at the crawlers, it's garbage in, garbage out type of phenomena, because it's like, it's never up to date. It's just best attempts on some folks' part to be able to really aggregate data. But we need to really take the friction out by agreeing on some set of semantic schema. That's the fundamental level. But once you have that, you have all of these properties working a lot more efficiently. So today we have CarPoint, which has its own notion of how do you get all the information, or Expedia, which has its own notion, but it gets much better. Go ahead.
So you said very quickly, agreeing on schemas. I don't understand who is agreeing and what the body for forcing such agreement is.
So there is two ways. One is we want to build this, so we will take some of the schemas and work with a set of merchants and retailers that want to participate in the marketplace. So to the extent to which anyone wants to be able to say they want to have a presence, because I think if you look at the consumer services that we want to create, right, which is the guides, the directories, the product searches, the shop, all of the set of convenience utilities, which in turn will attract a set of consumers. So you as a merchant have an incentive to participate in this marketplace. That's the first thing that will help us sort of get people to submit data in this
So
form.
this is an informal consortium?
Yeah, I think we were looking at sort of what's the best way to structure, because there's a specific MSN implementation, and then there is the schema definition itself. So we will sort of implement it as well as turn that infrastructure around, or the schema definitions to a standards body and run an open process
Like
independent.
W3C.
Yeah, there are actually, the thing is W3C to date has not gotten involved at that level of work, because they're still sort of at the infrastructure level. So there are other bodies. There's a company, there's something called ontology.com, there's CommerceNet, or ontology.org. There are a whole host of others who are sort of specifically focused on what are the schemas for given verticals or horizontal schemas. And so we're going to work with them.
But all of it, by definition, is XML compliant.
Correct.
You know, it just seems to me that the whole beauty of the web for a merchant is that they can provide their own information in whatever format they want, and consumers can get to it. You know, it's the whole disintermediation business. And so now Microsoft comes along and wants to be the intermediary and wants everybody to...
No, I think your point about sort of, in order to be an intermediary, you have to be able to aggregate data. What we really want to do is, in fact, if you look at what we're trying to do here, is it's no different than what our traditional identity has been, which is really provide infrastructure and platforms and tools to take some friction out. Because Microsoft has an identity to say, okay, we will, as part of MSN, build a consumer marketplace. But that's not the only use of the data. And here is an example. This manufacturer, take the digital camera example, right? They have created some product information for digital cameras. Today, they will have to submit the digital camera information specifically to Microsoft in one format, maybe some other portal in a different format, and in the consumer, in the more of the corporate marketplace, right? Just assume there's an insurance company that wants their employees to buy digital cameras, and they've set up their own infrastructure for doing that. That's a completely different flow. So what we're saying is, how do you get to a point where there is product information, promotional information, data interchange, which is a little less, with a little less friction. That's the basic goal. As opposed to saying Microsoft is the sole place where all this data gets aggregated.
What could be have lower friction than having each digital camera manufacturer have their own proof sheet?
Well, that isn't so much the point. The retailers have to now go and, whenever you go to a retail shop and look for the digital cameras, I always go to the camera website first and look at the stuff, then go to the retailer website. I mean, you can't get it at the retailers because they have terrible information.
So we're saying...
what happens is, I was going through this last night. You go to the retailers' websites and they have different product IDs or numbers than the manufacturers do. And then you look at it some more and you discover, well, that's because there's some specialized versions that are sold only in certain markets in the world. And they have different product designations, but they don't bother to have all that information.
But also,
there's an opportunity here for coalescing.
Right. And to your point, right, which is these marketplaces will only work to certain degrees, not as if we'll just have one marketplace. To the extent to which you want to reach some broad reach consumer space, you'll do this. But it doesn't limit you from using that same information for differentiating further. Right? So you don't have to sell the same product all day. Most times what the manufacturers and retailers will do is they'll say, this is a specific set of products that I sell in the consumer marketplace, and then I'll sell the rest in my own website or through other channels. Okay. I think I'll just sort of have one other slide, because that sort of specifically talked about what Microsoft is doing both with products and services. There is a whole host of other initiatives that Microsoft has in vertical spaces. So this is where we take our fundamental products and architecture and really accelerate the process of what we call the creation of trading webs within industries. And the best way to sort of look at this is what we've done. Maybe an example would be interesting. We've been working with Sainsbury in the UK, where they have deployed with Nestle a system where they can collaborate on forecast information and promotional information. So they've really created a way for them to exchange product, forecast information, promotional information, and it's had some good, ROI numbers in terms of, better inventory management and out-of-stock situations and sort of much less and so on. So that was a good example of a one-to-one collaboration over the web using some of this new technology. But that doesn't scale. So how do you really take that forward? So we're sort of then going to the next step and saying, we're working with a series of consumer packaged products companies, Heinz and Kellogg's and Procter & Gamble, and expanding that. Ultimately, where we want to take this is to a more of a many-to-many scenario, which is how do you get 20-odd retailers working with around 3,000 suppliers and deploy such a system. So now the concept here is that today most of the business-to-business is extranet hell, which is one given channel master will go in and say, this is my standard, and all you partners will sort of adhere to this standard. And then there will be another channel master who will do the same thing. The typical example of Mobil and Exxon, right? So the people who are dealing with both of them, or to GM and Chrysler, or GM and Ford. If you're dealing with both of them, they both have set up their own infrastructure, and how do you deal with that? So we have to really help industry bodies. And in the case of the auto industry, they in fact have a consortium called ANX, where they're really driving to a common standard for all suppliers. So those are the kinds of things that we want to propagate or help accelerate. So this is not, again, a Microsoft-defined standard. The question is, we just want this to happen. How do we put our resources, technology, and infrastructure to help make that happen? And there is some history behind this. I mean, we've been doing this for a while in the various verticals. So if you look at what we have done in, say, some of the product industry, we have a concept of, or we have an effort called Active Store, where we've been really working towards really taking in-store systems, your in-store processor, your point of sale, your distribution system, and agreeing on some common schemas and common infrastructure for being able to really do much more efficient implementation of how information flows. So we've done that. WinDNA AFS is another area where we've done that with things like OFX for the financial services, especially retail banking. So you take all of those efforts and then put in a new infrastructure which is centered around more XML, but it's not as if we will ignore the work that's been done in the EDI space or industry work that's already happening in the XML space. So how do you take that and really make the process or accelerate the process of these vertical industries? Because the ultimate dream is, I don't know if I have that slide, the ultimate dream is really do the cross-industry interchange. So you go in and walk into a hospital and think about all the data flow that happens behind after you've given him your social security number, right? So there is the insurance agent being contacted, there's the drug store that's being contacted, there's the drug manufacturer involved. So all of that information flow today is obviously hand-wired, and there's a lot of complex infrastructure. But in a world where there is a little better infrastructure and there's more semantic sort of grounding where people agree on as to what the information flow is, then we have a better chance of making this business-to-business commerce happen in a little more friction-free way. So that's sort of the summary of what are we doing both at the products level, at the MSN services space, and how we are sort of even trying to bring all of that together in the specific cases of some industry initiatives. Going forward, that slide talks about our roadmap, the products that we'll be releasing through the year, as well as some of the industry initiatives and the design reviews for it and so on. Go ahead.
This is really off topic a little bit, but I just remember this being kind of an interesting complexity in the old days. Where does taxation fit into all of this? Do we do a taxation module, or is that something which solution providers do?
Yeah,
it's a fairly general thing, and the other thing that's really complicated.
Yeah, so for example, when we do the service, we will pick. First of all, there are a couple of tax providers who have modules that plug into SiteServer today. There's Veritax and a couple of others who plug in taxation module. So for running the service, we have to make a choice and say this is the taxation module that sits behind our service, and that's what we will use. But as far as really the product itself, there are third parties. And the interesting thing there is even they're looking at a service and a product component, because the data itself flows in and it's live, so to speak, but the component, and the software to manage some of that ships. In fact, we ship a taxation component, an eval copy of it, if you will, as part of the product to just help jumpstart. And then you subscribe to the service and it becomes live.
There's an opportunity there. Microsoft can get involved with the government. There's this Internet Tax Freedom Act of 3 years.
Right.
Even as we speak, the states are really agitating that they're losing huge amount of revenues. And there will be some form of taxation in 2-3 years. If there's a way you can kind of say, if you set this up in the following way, states can collect whatever is reasonable and at the same time make the whole process friction-free.
Right.
I think somehow getting involved in that process of both legislation and standards and getting the states to buy into it, saying Microsoft is going to be your friend, rather than kind of make them lose money, might be one of the things.
That's a good point.
And the second related thing on a global scale is you probably find certain kinds of commerce things be embargoed in various ways, whether it's pornography or some other thing. People will want certain restrictions on whether it's Singapore or even Germany. Somehow you need ways of providing. The biggest current problem is the MP3
Right.
and people downloading music, and the people, the IP
Right.
issue. Namely, if I'm an owner of the IP and the technology that Microsoft is creating makes it easy to violate my IP, sooner or later I'll go complain to somebody. And
That we'll actually talk about next.
That, yeah,
This whole
that's-
topic.
Exactly. So in general, there are going to be issues of the kind that Rick raised, policy issues,
Sure.
which will ultimately become systems issues.
Sure. Yeah, you're right.
But they're not there today, but they'll be there in 2-3 years.
Right. So I think the taxation one is something that I'll follow up. That's an interesting one. We've sort of, been involved in very much on the sidelines through CommerceNet, but we're not taking an active stand as to what our stand there is. On the IP issue, obviously, there's a lot of people who've been talking about it.
Ed probably can help also. CRA, in particular, when we were at the floor, the staffers there were kind of tearing their hair out, saying nothing we do seems to be acceptable to the states. They're all screaming that they're losing money and
They just want more money.
No, they want the money they would have gotten.
Proactive lobbying.
But they're much more likely to get that. They're much more likely to get that through electronic than they are
Right,
through
absolutely.
the old mail orders.
Right,
Because there's no records.
Yeah.
Richard?
That's all they want.
Quick one. It sort of seems to me that, maybe I'm misunderstanding this, but there's a bunch of middleware stuff that it sort of seems that you were sort of saying, well, we're going to provide a lot of that, like the shopping carts and so on and so forth. And is there a place for third parties to add that value? So, for example, if you're a configuration management company like a Calico or something like that, do they fit into this?
Sure.
Or are they
Today, for people who are doing high-end catalog management or configured, the Calico actually has an add-on to Site Server Commerce Edition today.
Okay.
In fact, I forget whether Dell is using them, but there are actually, we have joint customers.
Okay. And the same thing with sort of on the front end, on the consumer side, like NetCentives or companies that do...
Again, same thing. NetCentives plugs in, Engage plugs in. So there are a whole host of folks who are doing that. It's just that when it comes to really small businesses, there'll be more of a packaged service.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I can't find the switch.
On the end here?